Hello, hello, hello. This is crazy back because, what can I say? I don't know, like herpes or a cockroach never go away. Just the moment that you think I'm gone, never mind my hand, I dyed my hair. Uh, the moment you think I'm gone, I scuttle back across. Um, I wanted to do a video today on toxic masculinity. And the reason for this is because it's something that's been weighing on my mind for a while. Now, full disclosure, I am a conservative, Trump supporting person. Don't mind the purple hair. It was a dare. Someone dared me to do it and said I wouldn't, and so I had to prove them wrong. Plus, I actually kind of like the look. Um, I'm a Trump supporting person. I believe in more or less traditional male and female roles, although I don't believe in the man should be the only breadwinner and women should be the tenders to the house thing. I think that that's a mutual decision that both parties need to reach on who does what. Any relationship based out of mutual respect is going to have some element of compromise in it somewhere. Um, but I believe in most of my particular opinions are conservative. I do have a few libertarian leanings, which is kind of gross, but I do. But I wanted to do a video, like I said, on toxic masculinity because it's a term that's been around for a couple years at this point. Toxic masculinity has been a phrase, and toxic masculinity was used originally, it was coined as a way to demean men. It was coined as a way to be able to humiliate men, to target men for being men, because they have characteristics that are different than women. And feminists, third wave feminists, which are obsessed with armpit hair and poor personal hygiene and screeching and probably exceptionally awful smells and being hundreds of pounds overweight, and then wondering why they can't find a man who's interested in them. Third wave feminism came out and coined this term toxic masculinity. And it's still used now. It's used to attack men, it's used to humiliate men, it's used to make men feel like they don't belong or they're somehow a problem, a stain on society, particularly here in the West in the United States. And for a long time, I would just dismiss the term entirely as sort of a leftist phrase that didn't really mean anything. But I've come to a conclusion that I wanted to share. And that conclusion is toxic masculinity actually does exist. It actually is real. But toxic masculinity is not what the left wants you to believe, what your professors want you to believe in 99% of cases. It's not what some screeching blue-haired Landwell wants you to believe. Toxic masculinity is not lifting weights. It's not fixing your car. It's not knowing how to repair things around the house. It's not wanting to be a good father or husband. It's not wanting to be the primary breadwinner. It's not wanting to be the protector of your partner. Male, female, doesn't matter. Toxic masculinity is not those things. But it is something else. And here's what toxic masculinity is for me. Toxic masculinity is the notion that young men, boys, grown men, should not reach out for help when they're struggling mentally, emotionally. That they should just deal with being depressed and suffering inside and wanting to kill themselves. White males, my particular demographic, make up the greatest proportion of suicides in the United States year over year. It's not even close. But we tell those men, as boys, and then all the way up to being grown men, that you shouldn't say anything. That somehow telling somebody that you're suffering, that you're depressed, you're suicidal, you're lonely, that somehow that makes you less of a man because you're not supposed to show weakness. You're not supposed to show chinks in your armor. Toxic masculinity, to me, is the idea that you have to force a particular emotional state of existence on men And it's mostly men that do this to men, right? Much in the same way that if you think about female to female dynamics as far as relationships are concerned, women are brutal to each other. I mean, they treat each other terribly. It's it's not fist fights and smashing through your door at 3 in the morning with a baseball bat or something, but it's underhanded, devious trickery. It's character assassination. It's reputation attacking. Women are cruel to each other, and they perpetuate these um, negative aspects of their relationships amongst themselves. Men do the same thing, but it's not the same as far as the mechanism by which that negative force manifests itself. Men tell young boys when they get injured not to cry. When your dog dies, not to cry. When you don't make it onto the sports team that you wanted, or in movies that are emotionally moving, you're not supposed to cry. You're not supposed to showcase emotion, because if you do, somehow that makes you less of a man. And these boys grow up, and most of them believe that, and they repeat the cycle, right? They have children of their own and teach them the same thing, or they encounter men who do show some emotion and just immediately dismiss them as being weaker or feminine or something else because they're showcasing emotion, and that's just not the way that I was taught, so that has to be not correct. That's toxic masculinity, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop. We cannot, as men, we cannot continue down this road of pretending we don't have emotion, pretending that we don't struggle with mental health issues, pretending that we don't struggle with emotional issues, pretending that we don't stand on the precipice of a chasm into alcoholism, drug dependency, depression, all kinds of addictive behaviors, because something is eating away at us. We cannot continue to teach young boys, who then will grow to be men, that they're not supposed to say anything, even if they're on the edge, even if the ground underneath their feet at the edge of that chasm is eroding away from underneath of them, and they are inevitably going to fall to the bottom unless they reach out. We need to not continue telling young men that you cannot reach out, that you have to just fall. And that's what mostly occurs in the West, in the United States at least. That's most of what happens around here. I don't think that men should be hyper emotional. I don't think men should cry at everything. I don't think that excess display of emotion is the antidote to the problem. But I do think that we need to get the messaging straight. We need to send out messages to young men, boys, that if you're struggling with, particularly with depression, with thoughts of suicide, as somebody who has been very close to that myself, and very, very close to that, incredibly close to it, a few times. Once just last year. I never told anyone. I'm the oldest of 3. There's me, my brother, and my sister. I'm the oldest of the 3. Our dads were never around. My sister, my brother and I share the same parents, and my sister, brother, and I share the same mom. Well, her dad and my brother and I's dad were never around. I was the oldest male, only by 11 months from my brother, but still the oldest male. And I wasn't supposed to feel that stuff. I wasn't supposed to tell anybody that stuff. So I didn't. Until last year. Last year, when I got very, very close, is when I decided that I needed to tell somebody. And it took me 2 weeks from the night that I almost ended my life to get to a point where I was comfortable enough, and still wildly uncomfortable, but comfortable enough to tell my mom. Men don't need to be weak. Men don't need to not be men. Men need to be men. They need to lift weights. They need to, go out and earn a living. They need to be able to take care of their woman, take care of their kids, take care of their male partner if that's the way that is. I don't care. Men need to embody what it is to be men. But there needs to be a space, there needs to be a message that says, if you get to a point where you are falling down a hole and you cannot pull yourself out, there is nothing wrong with you reaching out for help. There's nothing wrong with you admitting to someone that you need help because you can't do this on your own. Life overwhelms everyone, and we can't just keep pretending that men can handle this on their own. And this is, again, very dangerous for young boys. Young boys who are dealing with all these issues of growing up and going to school, going to high school, going to college, getting a first job, moving out. They might not be able to deal with all of this stress, the temptations of the world around them, especially once they leave home. And if you continue to tell them that they're not allowed to reach out for help, you're going to continue to find them hanging from racks in closets, jumping off bridges, shooting themselves. You're going to keep finding this happening. And we need to get the messaging straight. You know, it seems like the message more and more is that men can come forward, but then they're judged for it. They're still treated like they're weak or frail or fragile, that they're paper mache. It's no different than in, say, like the military or law enforcement, where if you're struggling with mental health issues, they tell you, department policy for at least police departments, and I imagine for the military too, is they want you to come forward. They want you to come forward and tell somebody, hey, I'm struggling with something right now. But when you do, then you're put on administrative leave, or you're forced to talk to a shrink. You're forced to talk to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Your duties are rescinded, right? You might not be able to carry a weapon. You might be, I don't know, put out, sent home without pay for however long. And the military is the same way. They do the same thing. It's a false message, right? It's signaling. We want you to come forward, but if you do, then we're going to treat you like you are broken, incapable. And that is not something that any man wants to feel. No man on earth wants to be made to feel incapable, especially when it comes to their job. But that's the same thing that happens to men outside of those institutions. We want men to come, you hear people say that, men should come forward when they're feeling depressed, come forward when they're feeling down, come forward when they're wrestling with addiction or, some kind of dependency, or they're in an abusive relationship. It's another really good example. And then when they do, they're ridiculed and mocked. They're treated like they're less than men. They're somehow effeminate in some way. Oh, you're a man in a relationship with a woman who beats you? Well, you need to let people know that. And then the moment you tell somebody that, you're now, weak. You're pathetic. You let a little girl beat you up, that kind of thing. Same thing's true with depression, that, pick yourself up by the bootstraps, it's just a skin knee, wipe the dirt off of it and, walk it off, walk your way home. That doesn't do anybody any good. We need to get the messaging fixed there. Toxic masculinity does exist. The left coined it as a term that meant nothing and was all a lie. And it was just about attacking men for being men. What the conservative side needs to do is say, no, toxic masculinity does exist. But it's not what they say it is. It's this narrative that's pushed by the older generation of men to the younger generation of men, and even by women onto men, that if you are dealing with mental health problems, depression, thoughts of suicide attempt, you have a drug dependency, you have some other kind of addiction that you can't get over, you have issues that are corroding you from the inside out. Toxic masculinity is the older generations telling the younger generations that you're not allowed to talk about that. That makes you less than a man. So you better bury it. You better never tell anybody. If you're gonna hang yourself in the closet or jump off of a bridge or, whatever else that you might decide to do, you better make sure that you told nobody. You better take that secret to your grave, because that will make you no longer a man. And this happens all the time. And then we wonder why. We wonder why we have fathers and brothers and sons who kill themselves. And people just wonder, why did this happen? Why did they never come forward? Well, they never came forward because the perception is, the narrative that's been set by the culture is, you're weak. And that's worse. For a lot of men, that was my biggest thing when I told my mom. I didn't want her to see me as being weak. I'm the oldest son. That was worse. For years it was worse. That's not the way that it needs to be handled. You need to listen. You need to make it so that they can come forward with these things and understand that, yeah, they are men, but they're also humans. They're just human beings. They deal with the same addictions and mental health problems and depression. And again, suicide. Depression and suicide are so critical to this conversation. They deal with those things too. And so long as the narrative that exists in the culture is that if you come forward about these things, you're somehow now less than a man because you're now weak, you're now incapable. As long as that's the message, the suicide rate's going to stay as absurd as it is. It's not going to get any better. And it's going to be cyclical. It's not like it's going to just grow out of itself. So long as this is what the older generation tells the new generation, you're going to see the same patterns happening. I mean, the world's not getting less crazy, it's getting more crazy, right? Our lives are not becoming more stable, they're becoming less stable, right? And as more and more things start to spiral out of control outside of the four walls of your particular domain, the less control that you have over things, the more likely it is that you're going to start to deal with things like mental health problems and depression and thoughts of suicide. And if you can't turn to anybody about that, eventually you're going to turn to a gun. The barrel of a gun, the end of a rope, a car in a garage, a bridge, a knife, pills, alcohol, overdose on heroin or fentanyl. So this needs to be the message. The left's version of toxic masculinity does not exist. It is a lie, it is an illusion. Being a man, there is nothing wrong with. However, being a man does not mean that you don't talk about being depressed or suicidal or dealing with addictions or having mental health problems. Being a man means that you are strong enough to admit to yourself and to other people when you are wrestling with a force that you yourself cannot overcome. That needs to be the message. Sorry for the video being so long. That's it. I'm done. I swear I'm finished ranting. Adios. I'm out, and I'll see you next time.